This is the Barrett Cemetery, established 1856, so pre-Civil War. Like many rural cemeteries in this area, they started out as just familial burial plots. The reason why it's called Barrett is because you'll find most of the graves in the cemetery have the name Barrett or are outside of the family, directly related in some way. It hasn't really been used since, I believe, the 1930s. What we want to look for here, even though there's a lot of history in this cemetery, is specifically the Sarah Luna grave. Sarah Luna is the reason why this cemetery has been dubbed by the locals the Blue Light Cemetery. Sarah Luna is associated with the blue light of this cemetery. The legend goes it was a common teenage dare to come out to the cemetery, and if you walked by Sarah Luna's grave, you would hear whispering coming out of her grave. If you approached too closely, a blue light would come out of her grave and chase you out of the cemetery. This then became, of course, a common teenage dare to spend the night by Sarah Luna's grave to see if you were too chicken and you would run out. If that legend seems very familiar, you're either a local to this area or you're an American. Blue light cemeteries are found across the nation. It's one of those reoccurring urban legends that live through the people. It's just that those kinds of stories, instead of starting with once upon a time, start with I once heard. As you can see here, she's smiling, which is a great sign. Part of the legend is that when she smiles, you're fine. If she frowns, you need to leave the cemetery. Besides that, there isn't much around the legend as to why she sends out the blue light. My theory is that since she's clearly posted right next to her husband and her young son here who died when he was 14 years old, she might feel mocked. I certainly wouldn't want a bunch of rowdy teenagers making jokes about me in front of my grave. Folklore is very fun. It's very interesting. Stories are fun. But it's important to recognize here that in this case, it involves a real human being with feelings. And this is her property, as we've said. So it's important that if you want to visit, you remember a couple of things. Be polite, say goodbye when you leave, and leave when you're asked.
Well, here we are at Hugh Springs. I'm standing in front of one of three springs that were discovered in the early 19th century, maybe the 18 teens. I want to say around 1813, Trammell's Trace was established, but it was primarily consisted of old Indian trails that a native Tennessean named Nicholas Trammell in his travels into Texas that he's going to use to funnel trade into East Texas. Some of that was possibly illegal, so a lot of smuggling was done along the trail. And then later on, as Americans started to flood into Texas in the 1820s and 30s, it was one of the primary routes of immigration for Americans. Another Tennessean named Reese Hughes came to this area specifically because of a local legend about buried treasure somewhere around these particular springs. They were called Chalybeate Springs, which basically is a generic term for iron-bearing springs. And it's maybe hard to notice, but you can see the red mineral deposits coming here, and it comes from the iron and the iron ore that's in the rock and soil around here. Trammell allegedly was a pirate, despite lack of any historical evidence that he ever had anything to do with piracy. Supposedly, his dealings with the pirate Jean Lafitte, who based out of Galveston for a time, he evidently took his share of gold, and when the U.S. government came and removed Lafitte from Galveston, Trammell took his gold north. He used this road, and allegedly under hostile Indian attack, he buried his treasure around here. Don't know exactly where, but these springs are what brought the original settlers, Reese Hughes and later on his family, to this area. They came looking for treasure. The treasure is most likely not really here, it's a nice story, and it served to bring people here. And the community of Hugh Springs, in a lot of ways, owes its foundation to that story.
In an area of Caddo Lake, near the small town of Uncertain, Texas, a mysterious tale is told and retold among the locals. It is said that a dangerous man once fled deep into the winding bayous to hide from his pursuers and his guilt. No one knows what he did or how long he wandered there among the trees, but afterward he claimed to have been followed incessantly by an unknown creature always hidden in the shadows. He could never describe the figure, but forever after he would find strands of Spanish moss from the lake in his pockets, in his hair, in his bed. Everywhere he went, always a strand of moss. The legend says that the older he got, the more moss he found, until one day someone stumbled upon him, dead in his cabin, his body filled with Spanish moss. Some say it's just a story. Some say they knew the man. Others dare to claim they have seen glimpses of the moss creature themselves, but no one can prove it. Perhaps one day the answer will be found in Caddo Lake, hidden there amidst the moss.
Imagine a dream or an idea that is just boiling so much inside of you that you can't wait to share it with the rest of the world. This is how Reverend Cannon felt when he ventured off into the community of Pittsburgh, Texas, to spread this like a wildfire in hopes of gathering investments of others, not only for himself, but for them. Chapters 1 through 10 of the book of Ezekiel describe what can be translated as God's way of telling man that they can fly like a bird. Reverend Cannon was fascinated with this idea. So he used this biblical text as his motivation and his blueprint to build the Ezekiel airship. If I asked you to imagine how big the Ezekiel airship was, you could use this for reference. And the reason why I say that is because this replica is only a third of the size of the original Ezekiel airship that propelled itself into the air. And from this book of Ezekiel, Reverend Cannon was so inspired that it moved him to get involved with the community of Pittsburgh, Texas, going around and asking for shares in this company, which at the time was $25 a piece, and a totality of capital for $200,000. In today's exchange, the Ezekiel airship would be worth well over $8 million. Imagine trying to explain to a group of people that you probably haven't even seen before that you've discovered a way to put man in the sky. I mean, how are they going to take this? Is anybody going to believe you? How many people are going to call you crazy? This replica has a wingspan of 26 feet. The original Ezekiel airship had a wingspan of 78 feet. The current exhibition room that the Ezekiel airship replica sits in is not enough in size to house the original Ezekiel airship. After the Pittsburgh Foundry and Machine Shop completed the build of the Ezekiel airship, they went out into a nearby pasture where they would attempt the very first flight. It's rumored that some members of the community were actually present for this. To this day, it is known that there are 5 accounts for actually seeing the airship take off and flying a total of 167 feet. One of the pilots, who was also a mechanic and engineer on the Ezekiel airship by the name of Stamp, was rumored to have been tangled up in the ropes and somehow snatched into the air. Well, I guess it's fair to say that he was taken on a pretty wild field trip.